It was a rented hall. Polished floors, high wooden beams, too much light for a winter night. Idaho Falls had just taken its first real breath of snow, and I remember thinking how fitting it was. White, cold, indifferent. The kind of night where your breath hangs in the air like something trying to escape your mouth before words can ruin it. The tablecloths were cream. I remember that. Not white. Cream, like someone had made the decision to soften things without actually changing them. Linda had picked them out. She said it would make the evening feel warmer. But the room still felt like a hospital lobby dressed up for prom. There were 24 people in that room. I counted them, not out loud, not obviously, but methodically. Co-workers, cousins, a neighbor who'd borrowed my snowblower 2 winters in a row without ever bringing it back full of gas. And at the center table, the one I'd paid extra for, sat Linda, her sister, and Evan. Evan. He had grown tall in the last few years. Broader in the shoulders, sharper in the tongue. The kind of boy who looked like a man in photos, who smiled with just enough charm that people missed the contempt under his teeth. I had helped raise him since he was 12. Drove him to his first practice. Paid for his braces. Sat in emergency rooms when he cracked his collarbone during football and cursed at the nurse for not moving fast enough. He called me Mike. Never Dad. Not once. Not even accidentally. The dinner was for me, technically. A send-off for a job up north. Field management. Away 9 months of the year, high pay, high cold. The kind of job you take when you're told you're needed but never treated like it. A chance to work in silence. To be valued for results, not tolerated for presence. Linda organized the dinner. Or at least that's what she said. But most of the actual arrangements had passed through me. My credit card, my follow-ups, my time. Even the speech notes she jotted down for the evening were on my office printer, marked up in my handwriting, edited for clarity like I always did for her. I didn't expect a tribute. I didn't want applause. But I thought, foolishly, that there might be some small recognition. Quiet thank you. A nod from Evan that said, "You mattered." Instead, he stood. I watched him push back his chair, casual, confident, and lift his glass. There was red wine in it. He was 21 now. Legal. Free. Dangerous in the way only young men with nothing to lose and too much inherited comfort can be. "Can I say something?" he asked, not really asking. Already standing. Already smiling. A few heads turned. Linda gave him that half-smile, the one that said, "Be nice," but never insisted on it. Evan raised his glass higher. The room quieted, as if some part of it knew what was coming, or at least sensed the shift in air pressure before the break. "To Michael," he said, "who's leaving us for the tundra or a pipeline or some oil field or other. We're gonna miss the snow boots by the door, the tools in the hallway, the what do you call it? Dad energy." Laughter. Polite so far. One cousin snorted. "And don't get me wrong," he continued, voice rising just a notch. "He's done a lot for us. Seriously. We had heat every winter and food, I guess." More laughter. I didn't move. I just stared at my water glass. There was a lemon slice floating in it, limp and thin like a yellow rag. "But hey," Evan said, and now he turned directly toward me. "We'll be just fine without you. Honestly?" He paused, letting the moment bloom, holding the silence like a wee asterisk p asterisk n. "We'll be better." That was when the real laughter started. Not the polite kind. The kind people give when they're too relieved it wasn't about them. It rolled through the room like spilled wine, messy, red, staining everything it touched. Even the waitstaff laughed. Even the guy with the unpaid snowblower loan chuckled behind his napkin. I looked at Linda. She didn't laugh. I'll give her that. But she smiled. Small. Dismissive. The kind of smile people give when their dog knocks over a lamp and they're too tired to be angry. A smile that says, "Boys will be boys." A smile that says, "Don't ruin this." She didn't look at me. That was worse than the smile. I sat there for exactly 3 seconds after the toast ended. Long enough for the laughter to die down. Long enough for the next person to raise their glass and say, "To Mike!" As if it hadn't all just happened. As if the words hadn't landed like a punch across the ribs. I stood up. No chair screech. No drama. Just stood, straightened my jacket, and nodded once, to no one in particular. Evan watched me. I could see the question forming behind his smirk. Is he really walking out? I didn't answer. I walked, past the buffet trays, past the photos Linda had printed of our family over the years, none of which showed me alone with Evan, past the banner that said, "We'll miss you," like a threat disguised as gratitude. The hallway outside was colder than I expected. Empty. My footsteps echoed. In the parking lot, I didn't start the truck right away. I just sat in the dark, watching the windows of the hall. They were lit golden and warm, like a snow globe holding people I didn't know. People I'd fed. People I'd driven home in storms. People who never once asked why I always brought my own shovel, even when the street was already plowed. I think they toasted again after I left. I saw glasses rise. Evan laughing, his mouth wide and careless. Linda sipping something. She looked beautiful. She always did. That never stopped, even when the silence between us did. I drove home alone. Didn't answer the phone when she called an hour later. Didn't check the text that said, Evan was joking. Come back? They thought it was a moment, a scene, a sulk. What they didn't realize, what Evan never understood, was that I believed him. I took him at his word. They thought it was pride. That was their first mistake. That I was just hurt, nursing some bruised ego, that I'd cool off, come back, wake up the next morning and fall back into place like a man too tired to hold a grudge. Like I always did. They thought it was a moment, a sulk, a tantrum in grown man form, something I would walk off. The way Linda used to walk off Evan's outbursts, her spine softening as soon as the door clicked behind her. Give it time, she'd say. He's young. I heard that phrase so many times it stopped sounding like an excuse and started sounding like a command. He's young. You're not. Be the adult. Bend. Absorb. Break quietly. I'd done that for a decade. But something about that toast, those 8 words, pulled the pin on everything I had buried under silence. We'll be just fine without you. Honestly, we'll be better. That wasn't a joke. I knew the difference. That was truth. Truth that had been growing inside him for years, like a mold behind the drywall, hidden until the smell hits you. And Linda? She didn't laugh. But she didn't stop him either. So I didn't respond. I didn't explain or accuse or demand apologies. Instead, I made a decision. Final one. The kind you don't say out loud. The kind that comes slowly at first. A pulse behind the ribcage, and then all at once like black ink spilling through clean water. I went home that night and sat in the dark. Didn't turn on the porch light. Didn't warm up leftovers. Just sat at the kitchen table, hands folded like a man at confession, and stared at the spot where Evan had once spilled soup as a teenager and never wiped it up. I cleaned it, of course, like I always did. Like I cleaned everything he touched. The messes, the damage, the lingering disrespect that never left a thank you behind. I stared at that table and realized everything I supported had learned to live without gratitude. They had adapted to the idea of me as background, as scaffolding, necessary, but never noticed. And now that the building was finished, now that Evan had a car, an apartment, a job he found himself, that I had lined up through a buddy, they believed they could knock the scaffolding down. And maybe they could. So I gave them what they wanted. Not with rage, not with threats, but with precision. I made a list. Quietly, deliberately, line by line, everything that bore my name. The wedding venue Evan had booked for the coming fall, under my credit, because his own had never recovered from his overdraft year in college. The rental house he was using for weekend parties, co-signed by me, leased through my account. The sound equipment I had financed for him to start his side business. Another dream I paid for, another applause line for someone else. The bills, the deposits, the foundation. I saw it clearly now. Every piece of their comfort tethered to my spine. So I stood up from that kitchen table, walked into my office, and opened every account. And one by one I erased myself. Not angrily, just absent. I withdrew from the venue reservation. The deposit would be lost. The final payment would bounce. Let them find out what that means when the emails start arriving. I canceled the catering. Evan had selected a full spread, filet, crab cakes, something artisanal with rosemary. All gone now. The speakers and lighting? Scheduled for delivery in 2 weeks. Cancelled with 3 clicks. The music? A 5-piece string band booked 6 months in advance. I was the contact. I was the signer. I deleted my name and left no one in its place. That was just the wedding. The apartment? I called the landlord first thing the next morning. Told him I was removing myself from the lease. Evan had been late twice already. Not my problem anymore, I said. If you need to evict him, follow your process. The landlord said nothing. He didn't have to. He knew what was coming. The business loan? I froze the account. It was under my name, my collateral. I take the hit, but he'd take the fall. No more grace period. No more extensions because my stepdad will cover it. And the bank card? The one Linda used to shop online. The one tied to our joint account. The one she used for small indulgences she never mentioned. Skincare, gifts for her sister, those rare weekends with her friends where I stayed home and watched the dog. I removed her access. Not out of vengeance, but because it was mine. Just like all of it had been mine. And then I sat back and waited. It didn't take long. By noon the next day, my phone buzzed once. Then again. Then constantly, calls from numbers I didn't recognize, voicemails from vendors, texts from Evan. At 12:42 p.m., the band emailed, "We've been informed our booking has been revoked due to payment failure. Please confirm." At 1:17 p.m., the caterer left a voicemail. "We need a new card on file or we'll release your date." At 2:01 p.m., Evan texted, "Why is everything being canceled? Did something happen with the payments?" "No, hey. No, sorry. Just panic disguised as confusion." I didn't answer. At 3:12 p.m., Linda called. I let it ring. She called again and again. Then the text came, "Michael, this has gone too far. What are you doing?" As if I was breaking something we hadn't already let rot. By evening, Evan's tone had changed. From confusion to accusation. "This is petty. You're being a child. You're punishing us over a joke. You're ruining my wedding. This is sick." Each message louder than the last. I read them in silence. No reply, because there was nothing to explain. He had said it. In front of everyone. With a smile. With pride. "We'll be better without you." I took him at his word. They all did. Linda had smiled. She could say it was awkwardness. She could say she didn't know what to do. But that's the thing about silence. It always sides with the louder voice. That night, the doorbell rang. I didn't answer. Then again. Louder. This time, knocking. Eventually, the front door opened. She still had a key, of course. Linda stood in the hallway, coat half-zipped, hair undone like she'd run here. "I don't understand what you're doing," she said. I sat on the couch, watching the fire I had lit out of habit. "I'm giving you what you wanted," I said. "A life without me." "You're being vindictive," she said. "No," I said. "I'm being obedient." Evan made a request. "I'm honoring it." She stared at me, mouth open, arms wrapped tight like armor. "You walked out of your own dinner." "No," I said again. "I walked out of a performance." She didn't respond. I stood up, walked to the door, held it open for her. "I'm not locking it," I said. "But if you stay alone. No bridge to Evan. No sympathy. No negotiation." She looked like she might cry, but she didn't. She stepped outside, and I closed the door. Behind it, silence. For the first time in years. Not peace, but something close. Something earned. They thought I wouldn't go through with it. That was the second mistake. They believed I was bluffing, flexing power I wouldn't really use, teaching a lesson I'd eventually walk back. Because that's what I'd always done, right? Pulled back before the knife cut too deep. Softened the edge. Sacrificed just enough to be useful, but never enough to make them feel it. But this time, I didn't soften a thing. That night, just one night after Evan's toast, one day after I began the cancellations, the cracks started to spider across their comfort like glass under pressure. And for the first time, I didn't rush to tape them. I didn't grab the broom. I sat back and let it shatter. It started with the venue. 7:04 p.m. Evan called me. I let it ring out. The voicemail came through 3 minutes later. They're saying the booking is void unless we pay the balance tonight. Tonight, Michael. What the hell did you do? No, please. No, can we talk? No trace of the man who once stood in my garage asking for help with his first job interview tie. He sounded cornered. And for once, I let him stay there. At 7:28 p.m. Linda called. I answered. I wanted to hear her voice. I needed to hear if anything in her tone resembled what I used to believe she had for me. Respect. Loyalty. Maybe regret. Michael, she started, breathless. They're canceling everything. Evan's freaking out. The venue, the caterer, the lighting guy. He said you. I did, I said flatly. A pause. You canceled his wedding. No, I said. He canceled any reason I had to keep paying for it. Another silence. I heard her shift the phone, cover the receiver, whisper something muffled to someone else. Then back again. You can't do this. I can, I said. I already did. And if Evan needs help picking up the pieces, he can call his father. Isn't that the line you all drew? Come on, she said, tired now. Not angry, just tired. You know Todd isn't going to help. He never. Then maybe, I interrupted. You should have thought of that before you both let Evan burn the bridge you kept driving over. She didn't answer. I hung up. At 8:01 p.m. My phone rang again. Unknown number. I picked up. Hi. This is Amanda from Starlight Events. We're just trying to confirm. There was a change in billing on the account for the Thompson-Hayes wedding. I'm not the contact anymore, I said. Remove me. Permanently. I hung up. 8:09 p.m. Text from Evan. This is actually insane. You're blowing up my entire life over a joke. You're gonna regret this. People are talking. Let them talk. Let them tell stories about the man who paid for everything for a decade and vanished in a single breath. Let them wonder what pushed him. Let them guess at what words finally broke the dam. Because I wasn't hiding. I was proving a point. At 8:34 p.m. The landlord messaged Evan. Your co-signer just withdrew. Lease terms require an alternate guarantor or we begin termination proceedings in 30 days. I saw the *T. Evan forwarded it to Linda, and Linda, either out of desperation or misguided hope, sent it to me with nothing but a question mark. I didn't answer. 9:02 p.m. Another text from Evan. This one longer. Less punctuation. More panic. Look, I know you're pissed, but you can't just destroy everything I built just because you got your feelings hurt. It's not that serious. You've always said family steps up. This is just temporary, right? That was when I knew it had landed. That was when I knew the scaffolding was gone. And the whole damn building was swaying. Because now he wasn't mocking. He was begging. The boy who stood in front of 24 people and announced that my absence would be an improvement. Now typing paragraphs in the dark. Praying that the man he dismissed was bluffing. But I wasn't bluffing. Because this wasn't emotion. This was justice. This was the cost of casual cruelty. The invoice for all the years of being tolerated instead of valued. And like any unpaid bill, it had come due with interest. By 9:30 p.m. Linda was calling again. I ignored it. Then again. And again. At 9:41 p.m. she showed up at the house. Not with apology, but with expectation. I opened the door. She didn't wait for an invitation. I don't know who you're trying to prove this to, she said, walking past me like it was still her house, like she still had rights here. No one, I said, just proving it to myself. She spun on her heel. You're humiliating him. No, I corrected. I'm teaching him. By destroying everything? No. By removing what was never appreciated. She looked at me, eyes wide, mouth open. But she didn't argue. Not with words. Just with silence. The same silence that had followed Evan's toast. The same silence she gave when he crossed lines and expected me to wipe the footprints clean. She stood in the middle of the living room. Her hands clenched like she didn't know what to hold anymore. "This isn't you," she said finally. "You've always been better than this." "No," I said. "You always believed I was too weak to stop. And that was the truth." She mistook endurance for passivity. Mistook sacrifice for obedience. Mistook the man who carried her life for the man who would never leave. Until I did. Until I walked out. Until I pulled the wires and let the lights go out. At 10:04 p.m. Evan texted me again. "I can't reach the photographer. He says his travel isn't covered anymore. Were you paying him too?" "Yes." I didn't reply. 10:15 p.m. A missed call from Todd. Yes, Todd. The ghost. The absentee. The man whose name lived on Evan's birth certificate but never once appeared on a check, a lease, or a tuition statement. He left a voicemail. Slurred. Accusatory. "Look, man. I don't know what kind of personal thing this is, but Evan's my son, and if you're trying to screw with his wedding." I deleted it halfway through. He had no authority here. Never did. Just biology and abandonment. A sperm donor with a zip code no one ever had on record. But now he was back in the picture. Not because he wanted to be, but because I had stepped out of frame. And suddenly Evan needed his real dad to do real things. By 11 p.m. Linda was gone. I watched her drive off. She didn't say goodbye. Didn't even slam the door. Just left, quietly, like someone fleeing a burning building they didn't want to admit they helped set on fire. The house was empty after that. Not just quiet, empty. No footsteps. No background music. No arguments bleeding through the walls. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the soft flicker of the fire slowly dying. I sat in the living room until midnight. Phone still on. Still buzzing every few minutes. Texts. Missed calls. Panic. Every time it lit up, it confirmed something for me. They were not fine without me. They were not better. They were crumbling. And I wasn't lifting a finger to stop it. I went to bed that night knowing something I'd never known before, that I had been the only adult in that house. The only constant. The only one who showed up even when it hurt. And I finally stopped. The next morning, the air felt different. Still but dense. Like something had been cut out of the atmosphere overnight and no one knew yet what it was. I woke up early. I didn't set an alarm. Didn't need one. My body was trained for this kind of morning, quiet, alert, waiting for the hammer to drop. Years of getting up before everyone else to shovel the driveway, fix the leaking sink, or call the repairman before Linda noticed the furnace clicking again. But today there was no task waiting. No list scribbled on the counter. Just coffee. And quiet. I stood in the kitchen watching the steam rise from my mug like smoke from wreckage. Everything felt off balance. Not broken, not yet, but shifted. Tilted. Like a structure left standing just long enough to make the collapse loud. Linda hadn't come home. I wasn't surprised. She didn't text, didn't call. Maybe she stayed at her sister's. Maybe she curled up next to the lie that Evan needed her more than I did. Maybe she was just afraid. Not of me, but of what it meant now that I'd stopped kneeling. I sipped my coffee and stared at the window. Snow had fallen overnight, just a dusting, but enough to cover the walk. Enough to give the illusion of calm. That was always the trick with snow. It hides what's rotting beneath. Quiets everything, the roads, the trees, the guilt. By 8:17 a.m. Evan called again. I watched the screen light up. Declined it. Another voicemail. I didn't listen. At 8:45, a knock at the door. I ignored it. The knock came again, louder, then softer. I stood behind the door, waiting for the sound to go away. I didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there like a monument to the man I used to be. Eventually, footsteps retreated. Final silence. That's what it took to make them understand. Not rage, not threats, just absence. Not the kind you threaten people with, the kind you enforce. That morning, I pulled out the drawer where I kept all the documentation, the wedding invoices, the loan contracts, the lease forms, the tuition bills. Everything with my name on it. My name, never his. That's what made it possible. That's what made it clean. They had laughed when I left that dinner. But they hadn't understood what I was walking away from. Not the meal. Not the insult. Not even the room. I was walking away from my role. That invisible title no one ever wrote down, the backbone. The stand-in. The man who showed up and never got thanked for it. The man who never asked to be called Dad, but hoped, every once in a while, that someone would mean it when they said, thank you. They never did. So I walked. And now, the system was failing without me. That's what life without you looks like when it's tested. Not in theory. Not in a smug toast over catered chicken and red wine. In practice. In missed payments. In bounced checks. In broken plans. Evan had built his world on the idea that I would always show up, no matter how far he pushed. He believed the safety net was stitched from obligation, not love. And when he tore love away, he thought the net would hold. Didn't. By noon, I had 3 more voicemails. 1 from Evan. 2 from Linda. Evan sounded different now. Not angry, just stunned. He didn't understand how fast it had all gone wrong. His voice cracked when he said he needed just a little help. He used the word please, once, hesitantly, like it hurt to say. Linda's first voicemail was defensive. You've made your point. Now stop. Don't make him pay for something he didn't mean. But he did mean it. And more importantly, he believed it. That's what made it real. She called again later, softer this time. I know this isn't you. Please, I just want to fix this. But it was me. Not the version of me they had grown used to, the fixer, the silent bearer of weight. The man who paid quietly and smiled through being erased. No, this version was the man they created. The man who finally learned that silence, when used correctly, becomes power. That evening, I sat by the fire again. I didn't turn on the TV. Didn't scroll my phone. Just sat there, watching the flames consume the logs 1 inch at a time. The house creaked. It always did in winter. I used to jump at every sound, wondering if something needed tightening, if a pipe was freezing, if Linda was cold. Tonight, I let the sounds echo. No fixing. No rescue. Let the house moan. Let them feel the absence. Because that's what they asked for. Isn't it? A life better without me. So I gave it to them. Brick by brick. Wire by wire. Dollar by dollar. Every system I supported, I stepped back from. And the silence that followed? It wasn't punishment. It was proof. I wasn't optional. I was structural. Let them find that out the hard way. Let them sit in their rented hall, staring at empty tables, canceled flowers, a wedding with no music and no power. Let them call Todd and hear him cough out excuses about being tapped out. Let them walk the perimeter of their own disrespect and realize it doesn't hold heat. By midnight, I got one last message. From Linda. No anger. No pleading. Just one sentence. I didn't realize how much depended on you. I didn't reply. Some lessons only stick when there's nothing left to answer.